I was born in 1930. I lived in New York City. My parents had come from Central Europe 10 years earlier because of the inflation there. My earliest memories are of the rise of Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. My parents were very concerned about that. It was a matter of discussion, constant discussion in our home. They helped people leave who wished to leave. So I was politically oriented to the left, to anti-fascism from very young years. And then after the war ended, I was still New York City, of course, was a political center in the United States, so one could go to rallies in Madison Square Garden and all that sort of thing, which I did do. When we came to the 1948 election, that was when Henry Wallace was running for president on a very radical platform, and I was active in something called Students for Wallace. But by this point I was in college, and I was in various kinds of organizations. I continued that, and a big turning point, I had this interest in India, actually. I was very interested in the Indian National Congress and in Gandhi and so forth. So I followed all of that, and I thought I was going to, perhaps work on India, but because I was involved in something else where I met Africans, I shifted my interest from India to Africa, and because I was good in French, I, from the very beginning, was interested both in what was going on in English-speaking Africa and in French-speaking Africa. So I came to the point where I was doing my dissertation. I did a dissertation on the role of voluntary organizations in the politics of British and French West Africa, and I then traveled a considerable number of times in Africa, which gave me a different perspective of the world completely. Some people, how shall I say, many people when they went to Africa tried to impose a Western point of view on them. I was educated by my African friends to see the world as Africans saw it, and that became a long-term commitment. So I continued to be active in all sorts of things, and indeed one of the big turning points was 1968, when there was this, what I saw as a worldwide revolution, and I was very active at Columbia University, where I was a junior professor in supporting the students and trying to mediate between them and the administration. So this consolidated, if you will, and undid some of my simplistic liberal ideas that I had had before. And then I became a professor, and actually I came here to Montreal for 4 years to be, and was active in movements here. In Oxfam, Quebec, for example, which was quite a radical organization at the time. I'm not sure how much it is now. I was active in that and attempted to protect them from the sense that they shouldn't have a Quebec organization but only a Canada-wide organization and so forth. And ever since then, I have always felt that there was no way someone could be apolitical. Being apolitical is simply being in support of the status quo, and that is a political position. So I never saw the conflict between activism and scholarship. They aren't the same thing, but I never saw the conflict between them. And I always felt that I could be a good scholar, informed by my moral principles and my political preferences, but still be a good scholar and nonetheless be very active politically, and ought to be very active politically. So there I am, here I am now, many years later, again in Montreal, and I still feel that I should be an activist as well as an intellectual. The first time I came to Africa, well, I actually came quite early. I came to a World Youth meeting in Dakar in 1952, and then traveled around for a week to other parts of French West Africa, and I met some of the people involved in the movements for independence already in 1952. So by the time, and then I came back again in 1955 for another meeting, and then by 1956, I was into my dissertation topic already. So this was a process whereby I got pulled in further and further to networks of people in various countries in West Africa. I was there at the beginning as a youth movement. Well, in Africa, it turns out at that time, youth was a category that was stretched quite further than one would think. So people who represented youth organizations were in their 30s, 40s, and even in their 50s. And the point is, these people whom I got to know 2 years later or 3 years later became prime ministers, foreign ministers, all sorts of things. So I began to have a series of contacts throughout East Africa. Then I stretched it to East Africa. I couldn't get into South Africa at the time. I was in fact on a blacklist apparently of the apartheid regime, and I similarly with Portuguese-speaking Africa, they wouldn't give me visas to get in, but that just strengthened what I was doing, and later, after the first wave of independence, there was the last attempts, which were in Portuguese-speaking Africa, as well as what is now called Zimbabwe and what is now called Tanzania. I was not only, I could speak to all of these people because I knew them all, and linguistically I was able to do it. So I became a sort of Africa specialist until I started writing about it in my work, and I suddenly realized that I was running after headlines. That is to say, I was trying to explain what happened today and then tomorrow and the next day, and I said, this is crazy. I have to find out. They were being called at the time new nations, and I said to myself, if there are new nations, there must have been old nations. And maybe I should look at the old nations to see how they became whatever. That was a very crazy idea, but it was a lucky one, because what it got me to do was to start to read about what I thought was old nations in the 16th century and how they became modern in quotation marks and so forth. And that's what got me into writing about the modern world system. So there I was, and I've been doing that ever since. I also write about immediate events too. In 1998 I started this system of bi-weekly commentaries, the 1st and the 15th of every month, and trying to analyze what is going on now in the light of the longue durée, to give some context for what is going on. Well, these are political interventions, of course. They're political commentaries, but they are informed by my scholarship as well. In 2001, I had been involved with some of the people who were part of the founding of the World Social Forum, but the first one in 2001 I did not come, and at that time they had a system where they invited speakers, and one of the people who was active in the World Social Forum put pressure on them, or suggested to them that they invite me to the 2002 meeting, and I came here it was in Porto Alegre, and of course as soon as I came I was converted to the importance of the World Social Forum, and I began to attend quite regularly. I haven't come to every single one, but I've come to most of them. I was in Porto Alegre at least twice. I was in Mumbai in India. I was in Nairobi in Kenya, and then I was in Dakar in Senegal. So, and here I am in Montreal. So, I've attended quite a few. I'm a great believer in the World Social Forum. I think well, I used to say it's the only game of town. It's the only place where there is a world movement for transformation. But of course it has lots of problems, and it's in difficulties because of the shift in the world situation. I mean, that the World Social Forum is not exempt from the realities of the world. And while we had a good 10 years, maybe from about 2000 to 2010, a good decade for progressive movements, especially in Latin America, but not only in Latin America, in many other parts of the world. What happened was, by processes internal to the world system, right, things moved in the other direction, and we suddenly are, as somebody said yesterday in a meeting, we're in a defensive mode rather than an offensive mode. And frankly, people aren't sure how to handle it. And so there's an immense amount of debate in the World Social Forum and in other progressive movements. Some people talk of the global justice movement as a sort of bigger tent of which the World Social Forum is one part. There's a tremendous debate about how the World Social Forum can be meaningfully participant in the present defensive mode. We've been debating that at this meeting, and as I said in this meeting, we've been debating that ever since I came in 2002, but we're debating it with more intensity now, and somehow people feel we should do something that's more politically active, but we're not sure quite how to do it and how to preserve the World Social Forum as a space where people can meet, etc. So there we are. I'm not sure I can. Children, I have grandchildren, those are very happy moments. My youngest grandchild has just become 12, and she came to this World Social Forum because she's a child activist, and she wanted to come very much and to get involved further, so that made me very happy. 1968 is a big turning point for me, right. I think it's a big turning point for the world, and I've written on that. I've written quite a bit about 1968 as a turning point, but it was certainly a turning point for me personally.
But in what ways?
Well, how should I say, in my understanding of the limitations of the possibility of transformation, how shall I say, a bit-by-bit transformation of the world just wouldn't work, and that we needed another world being possible, or as they say here in Montreal now, another world is necessary, and the necessary is possible. So, and the sense of having that feeling is something I didn't have before 1968. So for me, it's a turning point. So, I hope this helps you understand what was going on in my life, and maybe if it's of help to anyone, I'll be very glad. I don't intend to stop being an activist as long as I'm sort of on 2 feet.